was New Year's Eve, so there were still a lot of Christmas decorations up, and we were still in the holiday spirit. And everybody was celebrating. I had a 2-month-old, and we were taking the opportunity to have a night out while my parents were watching my son.
We went to the restaurant that I worked at. I remember having a good time.
About 11 o'clock, somebody at the restaurant had said they heard over the scanner that there was a stabbing.
We figured it was just some drunk idiot got in a fight and pulled out a knife, and we'll find out who it is later because it's small town Massachusetts. We're gonna hear about it.
But while we were heading home to my parents' house on Elm Street, we saw about 5 or 6 police cars on the road, which is not normal. I never thought that I would be sucked into this nightmare.
I was the on-call investigator, so I was just at home with the family. It was New Year's Eve, and we were waiting for the ball to drop when I got that phone call. I get a call from the Middleborough Police Department reporting an apparent homicide on Old Center Street in Middleborough, Massachusetts. The residence is located in a very rural part of Middleborough. It's across from a cranberry bog, and it's surrounded by woods. When I first arrived at the scene, it was cold outside. There had been a light snowfall. It was an inch or less. I was introduced to Mr. Gillen, who had discovered his oldest daughter, Tara, inside of the den with stab wounds. She was covered in blood. When I first saw Tara, you could immediately see the brutality that was involved in this crime. It was overkill. Tara was stabbed at least 21 times. "14 times in the upper back, 3 times in the neck, leaving a gaping injury. Mr. Gillen was, needless to say, very upset, but he was able to provide the details we needed. Tara was 20 years old at the time. She was a sophomore from Indiana University and was an English major, and she was home for the Christmas break between semesters. That evening, December 31st, was he and his wife's anniversary. So they had chosen to make plans to go out for dinner to celebrate. They had invited Tara to go with them, but she had declined and chose to stay home. So they returned about 11 p.m., and as he pulled up the driveway, he saw an open door. He immediately ran into the house. Entered the den area, which is right off of the kitchen. And when he saw his daughter, Tara, lying on her back, naked from the waist down, covered in blood, with a gaping wound to her neck, and she was unresponsive. He approaches Tara. He hears a noise out in this hot tub room that is adjacent to the den. He immediately yelled out, "I'll kill you, you bastard." When he got out into that room, there was nobody there. But he felt a blast of cold air, and that oriented him to realize that the window had been open. He also heard noises in the woods that were consistent with somebody fleeing. The breaking of branches, the squashing of snow, and footprints were leading away from his home. Mr. Gillen advised us that he located a blanket and he placed it over his daughter. Mr. Gillen remained by his daughter's side until the police arrived. As a person and as a parent and as the father of a daughter, I just cannot imagine what that felt like to make that discovery. Neither then, or frankly today, how you would even go on and deal with that. It's just tragic, tragic.
With any homicide, you look at various factors. She could have been targeted by a spurned lover or boyfriend. Her pants and her underwear had been pulled down to the ankle area. So you would assume that you may have a sexual assault involved as well.
Did she have an old acquaintance that knew she was in town, and maybe they knew that the parents went out and she was going to be alone? It was very difficult to make a determination whether Tara was targeted or if this was just a random crime.
December 31st, 1996, Old Center Street, Middleborough. Crime Scene Services, Middleborough, videotaping.
As we entered the house, things were tipped over. It was just an absolute mess. Could have been part of a burglary or somebody looking for valuables. We noted a cigarette butt in the middle of the carpeted hallway of the upstairs portion of the house. That was strange to us. I inspected the area that Mr. Gillen described from which he chased the assailant out of the house. The room contained a hot tub. There was a window that had opened up. Observations of that window indicated a forced exit.
When processing the scene, they also found a partial footwear impression on the hot tub cover. It was pointed in the direction away from the home. So that gave investigators the indication that that was a point of exit.
And then we had a second set of matching shoe prints that went around the side of the house.
The footwear impression had this wavy tread, and it had a circle in the ball of the foot area. We take photographs of the impression to give to investigating officers.
It was a tread pattern that was, to me, easily recognizable as a casual sneaker. It's virgin snow, so this likely was from the assailant leaving the scene. That's why that one shoe impression is so important, because it's just absolutely pristine. So based on that information, we began an initial tracking of the suspect. There was no murder weapon discovered at the scene, so one would have to believe that the suspect was still armed.
Officers were looking for footprints in the snow, the broken branches, property that he might have stolen and discarded, things that didn't belong there.
Additionally, a state police helicopter was put in the air. All patrols were on the lookout in this area. and we had canines to find the assailant.
Investigators had followed the trail, starting where he exited through the broken window, ultimately where they lost the trail in the cranberry bog.
After seeing what he did to the victim, I would say that there was a good possibility if he encountered someone, he would repeat his actions.
Was this killing personal, given the brutality that was involved in this crime? Or was it just a total random act of violence? Someone who was out for blood. We didn't know what we were up against with this killer who had fled the scene. If he was bold enough to kill Tara Gillen on New Year's Eve, he could do it again. There was a heavy police presence, cruisers going up and down the streets, there were helicopters up and canines.
Living in a small town, word travels very fast. Everywhere we went, that's all everybody was talking about.
I didn't think that something like that would be possible just because of the atmosphere in our town being so peaceful.
A lot of time was spent with families and friends and cookouts and backyard parties and, of course, rooting for all the Boston sports teams that might have been playing at the time.
It's a small town, a lot of working people, cranberry bogs. Middleborough would not be the type of town where you'd find a vicious murder. One of the things that investigators will look at is the neighbors within the immediate area.
So when detectives were advised that there was a registered sex offender living in a home immediately behind the victim's house, we raced to the house hoping that this could be the break we needed. There's the belief that this person could have been watching her while she was home for the holidays, stalking her, watching her every move. This was a slam dunk. A sex offender living directly behind the victim. But the resident advised them that the sexual offender was no longer there because he was currently incarcerated.
Whenever you have an investigation or homicide, your chances of solving it within the first 48 hours are 80%. From there, it begins to go down quickly with each ensuing day. So you flood the neighborhood with investigators, you're talking to neighbors, you're talking to friends, you're trying to get as much information as you can.
We were working down the street, knocking on doors, trying to get information, when we were approached by a neighbor. This neighbor advised detectives he found a door was open to his hayloft. Once detectives were told that the door to this hayloft was always kept shut, they figured it'd be a good thing to check it out to see if someone was possibly hiding up there. One of the detectives was shown the open door by the owner of the property. The detective went up into the loft to check it out. there was nothing. It was just full of cobwebs up in the hayloft. While detectives went to a house a few doors down from the scene of the crime, the resident stated that something odd did happen earlier in the week. She stated that when she was sleeping, she heard a noise. She pulled back the curtain, didn't see anything, and went back to sleep. But it did make her feel uncomfortable, as she felt that someone could be watching her. This is a lead that had to be considered because the neighbor lived so close to the victim that it was a possibility that she could have been watched by the perpetrator, and he was just hunting for his perfect victim.
The local detective was asked who in this neighborhood could be involved in something like this. The detective talked about one individual who in the past had committed some vandalism. There was a rumor, although never confirmed, that he actually pulled a knife out on his parents at some particular point in time.
That individual lived approximately a mile away from the Gillens. And to our amazement, shoe prints at the crime scene matched a different set of shoe prints found close to this kid's house.
One of the things that I do is footwear comparisons between shoes and impressions left behind at the scene. My goal is to identify the shoe, not only the manufacturer, but the actual model of the shoe. In this particular case, it was made by Puma, which is an athletic shoe company. I contacted the factory, and ironically, it was located here in Massachusetts. So right away, they were able to get back to me and said, hey, listen, this was a very unique shoe. This is a prototype. This didn't even make production. There's one shoe, there's one killer.
Find the shoe, find the killer. During those initial hours of that search for Tara's killer, we learned about a young man, Jonas Fell. This is a kid that, according to the police, had repeated interactions with. He was well known to them, and he lived less than a mile from Tara Gillen. We had shoe prints at the crime scene that matched shoe prints that brought us nearly to the Fell house in that direction and very close to it.
When detectives hear that type of information, right away they perk up. Here we have a troubled kid, the vandalism, potentially rumor that he's pulled a knife, and here we have a stabbing that's occurred to Tara. We decided to immediately go over to this individual's house and conduct an interview.
As we arrived at that house, it was early morning.
It was obvious that a party had taken place the evening before, evidence of bottles and cans from a get-together.
During an interview with Mr. Fell, Jonas's father, we learned that his son had hosted a New Year's Eve party at the house in the basement the night before. As far as he knew, it was just a regular party with the kids.
He had said that he, the father, had gone out the night before with his wife. They ultimately come home around 9 o'clock or so, and they found Jonas at the house, and there was nothing out of sorts or caused any reason for concern by him. Jonas had stayed there the entire time. But one of the things investigators still had questions about was, did Jonas pull a knife out on them at any particular time at all? He told them that that was just a rumor that was going around the town. It had never happened.
So in following the footprints from the Gillen house to Jonas's house, we had to be concerned with the fact that the killer could be one of the partygoers. Could the assailant be somewhere in the neighborhood, perhaps even watching us? We just didn't know. What we were told is this group of individuals met up at the local McDonald's. They got together around the 7 o'clock hour and then returned to Jonas's house for a planned New Year's Eve party. We know from our interviews that these partygoers drank beer, they had Goldschlager, that they played the games that these youngsters would play in terms of drinking games, but nothing ever got out of hand.
We stopped by the party around 9. It was pretty early on in the night because we had plans to go out afterwards.
There was about 20 or so kids there when we stopped there. Jonas was a friend of my brother's. It was more so my brother's group of friends. It seemed like they were having fun. Everybody was in good spirits. But it was just a crowded group of younger kids, so we left. I absolutely did not think anything that was going on was unusual at all.
During the course of talking with these partygoers, a common theme started to develop. Several individuals indicated one particular individual got into an argument and ended up leaving the party early. This individual was intimately involved with his girlfriend at the party. And at some point in time, before he finished, she went to use the restroom and then never returned. So he became upset at that. And this is around the time that that altercation or that verbal confrontation occurred. So whether he was upset and got into it with his girlfriend or just was being an ass because he was upset, it was not clear to us, but he was asked to leave the party by Jonas. So he left the house upset. His girlfriend went with him, trying to talk him into coming back to the party, but was unsuccessful. It was a cold evening. She got cold and she returned to the party and actually remained there the rest of the night. We didn't know if this was just some angry kid who ended up going home or if this was our actual killer. Less than 24 hours after Tara's murder, the name Ryan Burgess was given to us as an individual who had attended the party partially. In between the 9 and 10 p.m. hour, he'd gotten into the fight with a host and had left the party in the direction of the Gillen home. On his way home, the short amount of time before Tara Gillen was brutally murdered, and frankly, it had been the biggest break outside of that initial shoe impression that we had gotten.
As investigators talked to various individuals who had attended the party, and they described Mr. Burgess as an 18-year-old, as a quiet individual, kept to himself, had been bullied in the past. He wasn't an individual that had really gotten into trouble, wasn't an individual to start trouble. Investigators were able to get in contact with Ryan's girlfriend. She certainly did admit that they were together that night. She went back to the party and he went off on his own, but she just didn't think that he was the type of guy that could have committed that type of crime. Investigators started to check into Mr. Burgess's background. And they found out that he didn't live that far down the road from the Gillen residence. So right away again, another indicator that certainly they needed to talk to Mr. Burgess.
Detectives found out that Ryan Burgess was living with the Shelley family on Elm Street.
My mom was a big heart, and she had no problem opening her home to anybody that needed it. And when my brother said Ryan needs a bed to sleep in, she said absolutely. Ryan actually grew really close with my family. He would do anything for anybody. There were some kids in town that kind of felt like Ryan was a target. My brother would fight some of his battles for him when he needed to. Ryan was just more of a passive kind of kid. Ryan came from a tough background, but he was just the kind of kid that needed a break and needed someone to love him. The night of the party, I'd only seen him for an instant. When we were leaving, Ryan seemed like he had been feeling pretty good. That night, we had got back to my parents' house. It was just before midnight. And my son was already sleeping. And we were just sitting in the living room, waiting for the ball to drop. Ryan had walked in the door.
He was soaking wet from his waist down. And I remember looking at him like, for lack of better words, what are you doing? You know, and he looked at me and he's like, oh, I walked home and this and that. I made a comment about him being an idiot because he walked all the way home and we would have went and picked him up if he needed a ride.
Ryan went into the bedroom that he was sharing with my brother, changed, got some sweatpants on, and came out and sat on the couch and just talked to us.
And I said, we heard somebody got stabbed up on Old Center Street. You were up that way. You stab anybody tonight? No, just in his normal way. He was a fairly quiet kid. He didn't talk to you like face to face because he was always like head down, like, I was.
He just laughed it off and said, no, I have no idea.
We left, he went to bed. The night kind of just ended.
When we had woken up, my dad called, I need you guys to come over here. He just said the state police were there on Elm Street.
Obviously, it was a frantic drive over there because we had to know what was going on. We were going through every scenario in our head, what we thought had happened.
When we got there were reporters wanting to speak with us, and it seemed a little bit chaotic. With all of the chaos going on, detectives in the house getting various bits of information, it was pretty confusing and emotional at that time. And my dad said Ryan has been talked to about a break-in and a murder.
He's going through hell because he's getting accused of something he didn't do.
How do you know he didn't do it?
Because I know he didn't do it. I can just tell.
I was thinking they must have had the wrong person.
no way he had the capability of doing that. He's harmless. He's a good soul. He's got such a big heart. How could he possibly kill somebody? And I remember talking to the state troopers and saying, there's no way he did this. He got the wrong person.
When we announced ourselves at the Elm Street residence, Mrs. Shelley was surprised that we were there. We indicated to her that we had interest in speaking with Ryan Burgess. She indicated that Ryan was currently taking a shower. When Ryan came out of the shower, we introduced ourselves to him. We immediately observed that he had a cut to his left upper lip. In addition, he had several random scratches on both of his forearms.
When they asked him how he got these marks, he stated he was at a fight with somebody, but he couldn't remember who it was.
And we asked him if we might be able to see the clothing that he was wearing the night before. He consented to that and actually led us into his bedroom.
As investigators are going through his room, and they asked Mr. Burgess for the shoes he had been wearing the night before, he reached under the bed, pulled out a pair of Pumas, blue Pumas. They looked at the shoes, but immediately their attention was drawn to the outsole. And what they noted was the same wavy pattern with the circle that they had seen the night before.
That was the golden ticket. Those shoes matched exactly what we saw at the Gilling crime scene. This is when I knew we had our suspect. We left the residence and began driving to the State Police Barracks, which was actually very close to the Elm Street location. We said to him, Ryan, we know what happened last night. And he said to us, I don't know what you're talking about. Is Ryan, did you enter a house on Old Center Street? Maybe to get warm? He denied that. And we said, Ryan, maybe the person even let you in. Maybe they even came on to you. And to our amazement, he said, yeah, she came on to me. She led me on. That was the first indication from him, almost a soft admission, that's putting him at the residence with Tara. This was big. But we pressed it a little bit more. We said, Ryan, we think something bad happened in that house.
And that's when Mr. Burgess started to come around and talk about what had actually happened.
He said after a fight with his girlfriend, he left the Fell house at around 9 p.m. He actually sees a car back out of a driveway at the Gillen residence. He went around the side of the house. He entered a screened porch area through a storm door that was unlocked. He could see a young female watching TV. He was surprised that all of a sudden she showed up right at the door, face to face with him just through the glass. She asked him who he was and what he wanted, and his response was, I'm friends with your sister. Somehow, the door ends up opening, and she tried to run away from him. And he caught up with her. Tara screamed. And when she screamed, he reached up with both hands and began strangling her. He continued to squeeze and strangle her. She fell to the floor. And while she lay there, gasping for breath, trying to breathe, according to him, he went out into the kitchen. He retrieved a steak knife, and as Tara continued to try to breathe, she saw him coming and tried to run away from him. But she fell down on the ground. And that's when he began to stab her. At least 21 times. He had removed her pants, and he stated to us that he had intercourse with her. Ryan stated after ransacking the house and had his cigarette, he heard a car approaching. And at this time, he knew he had to get out of the house. That's when Wisda Gillen had come home and found her. Horribly horrific. It's just the total randomness of that evening to put all these pieces in place with the ultimate loss of Tara's life is just incomprehensible.
When I found out what had transpired and how brutal everything was, that was a tough moment.
Several days later, with Ryan's help, he was able to guide us to the location of the murder weapon.
Ryan stated that while he was running, he threw the knife in the darkness into what he believed was a cranberry bog. And we started walking along the edge of the cranberry bog. And somebody found it.
We found out that Ryan dropped out of school in the 9th grade, got involved with drugs, and had a history of breaking and entering. By 1996, his parents had actually put him out of the house, and that's when he met the Shelleys, and the Shelleys took him in and gave him a place to stay at their home. Ryan Burgess was ultimately found guilty of murder in the first degree, which amounted to life in prison without the opportunity of parole.
It does make him a monster, but I think that monster was buried down deep inside, and something happened that night, and that all came out.
I don't think that Ryan was able to digest what he did. I think the guilt and the remorse for what he had done was just unbearable. He destroyed not just Tara's life, but her parents, the rest of her family. It is something you can't come back from. It was only a couple of years after he was incarcerated that he took his own life.
Tara had her whole life in front of her. The 20-year-old, she had barely begun to live it, and her life is just wiped out for no reason at all, and that's it. There's no replay, there's no pause, there's no rewind.
That house on Elm Street was a horror scene.
Somebody died in my house. Somebody what? Died.
She paste up the nose and shampoo in the eyes.
Never seen a scene like this before.
They only left the 3-year-old alive.
His mom had always told him that monsters aren't real. She was wrong.